Fed keeps cutting. We have a Fed meeting this week, so we should get another 25 basis point cut, considering that, not that inflation is the big talk of the town. It isn't. It's not. It's still labor is what matters the most. Expanding our money supply because the Fed has been restricted. I'm going to explain that.
Credit card loans, car loans, those are short-term borrowing rates, and they are low right now.
Microsoft and Google came out and said, we're not going to reduce our billions of dollars of spending. Existing home sales, 4 million home sales annual rate. That's with a little drop. Hey, it's KP coming to you live from Corona, California. What a wild couple weeks of all this travel from the American pastime to the American dream. It is after midnight here. It is officially Tuesday and the longest World Series game ever. Dodgers won, in case you didn't see the headline. Freddie Freeman, another game-winning walk-off home run. Man, I have not watched any baseball. I just have not had any time. And I decided to watch this game tonight, starting in like the 7th inning when it was 4-4, and it went 18 innings. So anyway, our co-founder and COO, Robert Holliday, is a humongous Dodgers fan. He was there texting with the 4 partners. We were all texting the entire time. So finally caught up. Wow, shout out to NBA, NAM, AIM. Man, it's been a crazy couple weeks, and there's a lot to talk about. So CPI came out last Friday, and it was less than feared, right? So the core CPI only went up 0.2 instead of 0.3. Therefore, we're at 3% year over year instead of 3.1. Now, that headline was kind of bond friendly, but then, look at the internals. So there's something called supercore. We've talked about supercore a little bit here in the past, but basically core ships out the volatile food and energy, which, by the way, gas prices going up was a big contributor to the headline number. Then the core number ships that number out, which gas prices and, oil and petroleum have generally, if you follow the price per barrel of oil, it's generally been trending down and pretty low. So that's been very friendly to people's pocketbooks at home. And if you're a homeowner being locked into a rate many moons ago, it is also a blessing for your family. And food wasn't too crazy. But, Supercore also strips out housing, and that was up 0.35%. And it was up a little bit, not as much as it was a few months back in the 0.4%, but it was up from last month. So the services inflation was up. Can you say it's tariffs' fault? Can you say it's just a 1 month, one-off thing? I don't know. I mean, people have money. I mean, people feel wealthy. Look at the stock market. I'm not a financial advisor. I am not responsible for your losses, only your profits. But the stock market is ripping again at all-time highs. And so what's going to derail that? What's going to derail lower interest rates? What's going to derail the flow of money? We probably won't see really any material sense of that until Q2 or even the second half of next year. So let me explain how this all comes together and how that could be a positive omen for housing in the purchase season, spring purchase season, if rates stay continually low and at this level. We're catching a good refi bid. I saw that basically Q3 numbers were just about the same as Q2, which is Q2 is purchase heavy, Q3 has been refi heavy, heavier than normal. So companies that don't have a high percentage of refinance business might not be sharing my enthusiasm. We're a 3-channel lender, and it takes a lot to do that, by the way. And we're having a great month. So rates being low are benefiting a lot of people. I think I read somewhere that there's like as many mortgage holders with rates over 6% as there are with rates under 3%, about 20% of all mortgages in each group. So that's a lot of refinancing opportunity, which is out there. So all the systems we've set up and continue to set up, and, if Fed keeps cutting, we have a Fed meeting this week. So we should get another 25 basis point cut, considering that, not that inflation is the big talk of the town. It isn't. It's not. It's still labor is what matters the most. But inflation was down enough and soft enough to warrant a further cut. Now, if there's a 25 basis point cut this week, and then there's, which will be Wednesday, and if there's another cut in December and possibly one more next year, and who knows, we're trying to get 5 candidates now. The list is short for Fed Chair Powell's replacement. He's out in May, and all of them are basically pledging their allegiance to try and say, the Fed board doesn't need to act in unison, and groupthink is maybe not a good thing. And I'll get into the candidates in just a second. But we could have lower rates into next year. And this is what a soft landing looks like. And so everyone climbs a wall of worry. I mean, some people, are preppers and they turn tail and run. By the way, my hat's not crooked. My nose is. Some people are preppers and think the end of the world is coming any day now. And it might, probably from an asteroid, most likely. But then you have people that are very conservative. They invest in bonds not to lose money, right? You invest in stocks to make money. You invest in bonds not to lose money, to preserve your wealth. There are people that invest in gold that are ultra conservative, and there are people who invest in growth and stocks and businesses that are progressing and moving forward and create capital. And I've gone 5.5 minutes here not saying AI, but AI will change the landscape of our economy. It's probably a little overhyped right now, but in the long term, it's way underhyped. It's unbelievable what it can do. So what's on deck this week? Besides the Fed meeting, we had some 2- and 5-year auctions, which were pretty decent. Case-Shiller Home Price Index comes out probably before you even open this video, so we'll see where home price appreciation is. So that would be for the month of August. So they're usually like 2 months behind. And then, the government's still shut down with no end in sight. Now, there is talk that, in November, people have to re-enroll for their health care, and without the Affordable Health Care Act, also known as Obamacare, without those subsidies, some people could see a pretty significant increase in their health care, and that will strap people's checkbooks at home, and that's a super big burden. People getting payments from welfare, they will start to get strapped at the beginning of November, and those are seen as an impetus to hopefully get the two sides together to try and get some continuing resolution. So a continuing resolution, is just kind of, a few different ways the government tries to fund itself. You have a budget that you set, like the One Big Beautiful Bill that got signed July 4th. And then you have a new fiscal year that started October 1st. And if another bill is not set, which typically isn't that quickly, then you just say, well, we're just going to keep things going as it is with the continuing resolution. That is still shutting the government down because both sides can't come together for a 60 majority vote. Although the 2 senators from Georgia have both seemed to have broken ranks and said that they're willing to do a deal. So, time heals all wounds, I guess. The American Defense Appropriations Act, that is another bill that gets done. So there are all these different levers to pull to try and fund our government, attach bills to, and get the flow of money going. With the One Big Beautiful Bill signed in July 4th, it's very front-loaded with a lot of stimulus, tax breaks, capital expenditure breaks, no tips on overtime, and all these different things. And that's all seen as front-loaded as well to stimulate the economy. So we'll watch GDP. Will it cause more inflation? Tariffs doesn't seem to have caused inflation. Everyone's been talking about tariffs since Liberation Day, and it's never quite materialized to the level of the hype because we climb a wall of worry. So do you climb a wall of worry? We have to be introspective and at some point say, the economy's doing fine, labor's soft but not breaking, the Fed is back to a cutting cycle, money is flowing, the economy is fine, I repeat, and not for everybody. We definitely have a K-shaped economy. We have our problems. Stock market is ripping. People feel wealthy. Therefore, they go out to services and they, go to restaurants. They go out. They book travel. Airlines are doing well. Car sales are up, partly due to tariffs protecting GM and Ford. And their CEOs have said as much. So, again, we're in 2025, almost 2026. It'll be 4 years in March since I believe the Fed started hiking rates and everyone was afraid of a recession. We never had a full-blown recession. We've had rolling recessions. We're still in a manufacturing recession. Generally has not seen growth. the top of markets, tops of stock markets, you see a euphoric stage where people finally listen to things I'm saying and go, you know what, I'm just gonna buy NVIDIA. It's earnings season. 5 of the Mag 7 report this week. It's an incredible earnings week. It's unbelievable. I think Meta, Facebook, Google, Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft, they all report this week, and they are enormous businesses with tons of free flowing cash, spending literally hundreds of billions of dollars to build up data centers and AI infrastructure, which, leads to building up energy infrastructure. And so this country has a lot going on. It's really hard to sit back and say we are not in a soft landing. And just when owner's equivalent rent seems to have come down in the CPI, just when housing seems to, kind of soften a little bit, lagging indicators from 12 months information, rents have kind of softened a little bit. Here comes this new flow of money with the Fed cutting rates that could spur on economic activity in addition to the fiscal stimulus from the one big beautiful bill. This is what a soft landing looks like. So I can't say that everything the Fed has done is great, but they seem to be threading this needle because it's very hard. Remember the SOM rule? When the unemployment rate goes up by half a point within like a 3 or 6 month period, that means there's a recession. Inverted yield curve, which uninverted a year ago on September 7th, the 10-year Treasury, 2-year Treasury yields uninverting. Well, when there's an inversion and then it goes to uninversion, that also means a recession is coming. Still hasn't come. Housing's been in a recession. Now we're doing much better. It's a pretty normal housing market. Existing home sales has been loosening up a little bit. Lower rates cures a lot. So I don't know, what all this means, but getting over to the 5 candidates that Treasury Besant has announced that are the candidates to replace Chair Powell. You've got your front runners like Fed Chair Waller, and then you've also got Michelle Bowman. I still think Waller's the leading candidate. National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett, and former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh. The one I like a lot, other than Waller, is BlackRock's executive Rick Reeder. He is in charge of all fixed income securities at BlackRock. I mean, literally like $1 trillion plus. And he's got a really sharp mind about the markets. So maybe getting someone to come in who understands the flow of money and capital market structure to provide liquidity, to sell our treasuries, to fund our government, which has a debt and deficit, which the deficit has come down more than it has in many, many years, paying down our debt. Maybe that mind is what the shakeup is needed at the Fed to get out of that groupthink of just looking at economic reports that include data from 12 months ago. The bond market tends to lead the Fed actions, and the 2-year Treasury is at 350, screaming that the Fed has room to cut at least another 50 basis points. So we'll keep an eye on all that stuff and how the flow of money works out. Lots of changes at Fannie and Freddie. Leadership changes, CEO level, and nevertheless, companies just keep humming along. Chase, they boost their market share in the second quarter, $495 billion of first lien residential mortgages were originated in the second quarter of 25. They are, they boosted their production by 44.8%. So, there's a lot going on for this country. I know this was one of my longer ones, videos, and I hope you stayed with me until the end. But there's a lot going on, especially this week. Earnings, Fed speak, not as much data. Maybe the government shutdown will come to an end next week. And then, oh, by the way, next week, the Treasury's quarterly refunding announcement will come out. That's when they say how many treasuries they're going to sell to fund our government. And will they sell more 30 years, more 2 years, more long-term, more short-term? We have a lot to pay for because one big beautiful bill is a $4 trillion bill with a $5 trillion debt ceiling in case it goes over, even though the government's shut down. And government employees hang in there. I think every TSA person I talked to, which is like 24 just in the last 10 days, they're not getting paid right now. And they're strapped and they're overworked, just like a lot of us in the mortgage industry right now because it's very busy. But it's a blessing to have your health, a blessing to have our profession and help foster the American dream. And I'm out, and I'll get back to you Thursday. Have a good one. Cheers. KP coming to you live from Corona, California. Just watched the Dodgers lose. What a bummer. It's 8:13 here on the West Coast. My birthday, August 13th. And God, what a week today has been. I normally don't do a Wednesday video, but we had so much going on and I had to crank this stuff out so I didn't have like a 15-minute video tomorrow. Maybe I'll do a video Friday, maybe not. We'll see how the week goes. It is Halloween. So, we had the Fed speak today. Rates went up after a rate cut, okay? And I watched the entire press conference, so you don't have to, and I'll tell you about it. Pretty important. And then the comments were hawkish. And Chair Powell put cold water, we're pretty far away from certainty on a December cut, basically, is what he said. So, which brought uncertainty to the markets, which for sure baked in a December cut, plus, another cut next year. And, I can get into all that. But, oh my gosh, earnings reports from 4 of the Mag 7, the Magnificent 7. I'm not a financial advisor. I am not responsible for your losses, only your profits. We could talk about that. There is a tremendous amount of housing news that came out today. And, I talked to a good friend of mine. We talked about mental health today. I had, with Steve Scanlon at Rewire, I had a coaching session this morning, try and get my brain right, make sure that my mindset is there. This is not coaching like, make more calls, go out there, be disciplined, do this at every time of the day. It was more about how, I can work on metacognition. Steve's a great man and great company. And so if you're ever feeling some type of way, something I've been saying since I went down these wormholes on TikTok all summer on Curios or Cosmic Curios, there's an asteroid coming to take us all out at any moment, right? Like just, or a pandemic or a zombie apocalypse, or there's only 50 nuclear warheads it takes to destroy all life as we know it on Earth. So, things aren't that bad. It's just, you just got to keep taking it, one day at a time. Speaking of asteroids, the last 3 days I've gone down a super wormhole, 3I Atlas. Have you seen this? There's this giant meteor that's coming within the orbit of Mars on the other side of the sun, about 150,000 miles, away from the sun. And it's insane. I mean, it's like this enormous thing. Is it an alien? It's moving unnaturally. Those rumors are kind of crazy. Go down that wormhole and check that out, and you'll feel really insignificant about, the Azure outage today from Microsoft, who reported earnings and got punished a little bit because they missed, instead of like 32 billion, 32.9, they hit 32.2 billion in a quarter on something. Anyway, Fed Chair Powell said that we are in a fog. Obviously, the government's still shut down, no end in sight. Going to be an interesting battle next week when the EBT cards are not funded, when people have to renegotiate their health care, their Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, whatever you want to call it. So both sides are waiting to see, how the chips fall. So I'm just gonna lock my doors and just protect the house and the family and pray to God that, all these things don't become the end of the world. Although Bill Gates just said yesterday that climate change is improving and that we're doing a better job with emissions, and the path we're on will not decimate civilization as we know it. In fact, we have to stay vigilant and make sure we work on our emissions, which have been lowered. So, maybe it is the end of the world when he's saying that climate change isn't the end of the world. So, okay, Fed talk. Here we go. Get away from all that. Microsoft sold off after market, by the way, a little bit. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Because remember, the flow of money, stocks and bonds. If the stock market sells off, money will flow into bonds, the safer asset, the flight to quality. If you need a flight to safety like that in case an asteroid is coming or whatever is going to happen to our country, every 25 basis point cut by the Fed saves us $88 billion a year in interest on the federal debt, okay, which is $38 trillion. That's a good thing. So more cuts could save us more money, and we don't saddle our grandchildren with this problem. Now it's like our children, or it's actually us now. So December 1st, quantitative tightening stops. They've been reducing the amount that they've been running off their balance sheet. Remember, that balance sheet of the Fed, okay, is a backstop for, there was a Freudian slip there by Chair Powell today. not the economy. He didn't say that first. He said the banking system. And if you remember, the reason the Fed was created was to help protect the banking system, which had a run back in 1907, which I talked about on my video last week from Nashville, if you could hear it without, all the noise in the background. So he said that first. The banking system, the money center banks have trillions of dollars, and they use this thing called the Fed repo facility. There's Fed overnight lending. Like, hey, we need some money at this bank. We got a problem with this commercial loan. We got a problem with this company that went out of business, Tricolor, or this company or that company, or our fund got blown up, or this guy cheated us on CBS stock. Remember that a couple years ago, or whatever. So banks borrow money from the Fed, emergency, overnight. And that rate of that overnight Fed repo facility was actually higher than the Fed funds rate. That's not a good thing. And if our economy is growing and the balance sheet is shrinking, the Fed doesn't have the tools it needs to help keep the flow and velocity of money going so we can grow our GDP, create jobs, help people, who are in the government welfare program while the government shut down, or whatever the case may be. We're down to 21% of the GDP, the Fed's balance sheet. They've reduced $2.2 trillion. They're done. They want to freeze that runoff. And any mortgage-backed securities that run off, they will reinvest that money once they get paid out into treasuries. So what they said is, if the dollar, the value of the dollar goes down, they have these non-treasury, instruments on their balance sheet too, like currency. And if those values go down, that balance sheet will continue to shrink, even if they're not letting it run off any further and not doing quantitative tightening. So they can't actually freeze it. So they're going to think about that over the coming months and how they're going to keep our economy in the skids greased, keep the velocity of money flowing, which is what helps us. And so if he's not going to cut rates and keep the flow of money going, you could see at least today's knee-jerk reaction, interest rates went up. And that was not seen as a good thing. So it could change tomorrow, by the way. I mean, we just go right back down to where we were before the meeting with a simple little market correction, some sell-off. The market's pretty toppy, stock market, S&P, NASDAQ. I don't ever look at the Dow anymore because we're not really a manufacturing company. It's kind of an old thing. I like to look at the S&P index. And so 22 minutes before the Fed spoke, I bought an S&P put expiring next Friday, saying when we were at 6,925 on the S&P, I said 6,800 by next Friday. And boom, he started speaking. That thing was worth $9,000. Sold half, letting the rest ride. We'll see. So if the stock market goes down anymore between now and next Friday, your boy here will make a little money. NVIDIA, the first $5 trillion company ever. $5 trillion. I mean, literally the entire stock market of Germany, Italy, and France is combined is not as big as just NVIDIA. I bought into NVIDIA for the first time in 2004. I used to work at, 2002. I used to work at Dell Computers, and we sold the GeForce NVIDIA graphics card. Shout out to my Dell peeps watching. That was the upgraded card. I had no idea it would turn into, GPUs and AI and everything it was, but they were a premium service and had scarcity and control. So look around you. You want to invest, look at what people are doing. Look at what's scarce. Look at what you can't get anywhere else. And, you may be looking at your iPhone. Apple and Amazon reports tomorrow. You may be ordering, stuff from China, which I hope it gets here. I just found out what our costumes is going to make here in time. First world problems. But those two, I think there's a holiday or something going on in China and a trade war. But, those two companies report tomorrow, and then NVIDIA reports later on in November, like the last of the Mag 7. But don't worry about them. They're doing great. They have a backlog of like a year plus. They're incredible, $5 trillion company. I actually, in one of my accounts, one of my stock accounts, I have, the only rule I have is do not sell NVIDIA. I've owned it since $8. Like never, ever, ever sell that one. That's my only rule. Everything else you can do whatever you want with. So shout out to Career Advisors, Keith Nickel. So my point is not to sit here and talk about my investment, because trust me, I lose a lot, and I could talk about that. This isn't social media. I am not everything I touch turns to gold. Which is plummeting, by the way, and may continue to do so if the dollar rebounds and if inflation comes down and China stops buying all this gold as a hedge against the dollar because they don't have enough dollars. I digress. Tariff goods inflation is up, but the Chair Powell said it is still a one-time bump. So the Fed does generally expect the tariff goods inflation to smooth out over time. if wages aren't keeping up and it's harder to find a job and your income goes to zero and you cannot buy and then pump up our economy, doesn't really matter. And even at 2.3% inflation, which is what their core reading is, excluding tariff goods and housing services, 2.3, right? Non-housing services went up a little bit in the CPI, but we don't have any data because the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, is shut down with this government shutdown. So like I said, Chair Powell said we are driving in the fog now because we don't have as much data. They shout out to jobless claims from the states, shout out to Beige Book, some things they're looking at. You can look at it too. You can see what the Fed's looking at. But when you drive in the fog, you slow down. By the way, last night, super foggy in Newport Beach as I was cruising home from CDM restaurant, if you know, upstairs, had a quick little dinner. Talked to a gentleman, a buddy of mine is, up there eating. He founded Marucci Bats, speaking of baseball, and sold that company. And he was talking about our lack of power. We don't have the power to power all these data centers and all this infrastructure that we're building. And he's spot on. And so energy is a great play. You can invest a couple dollars here and there, invest in the future, make money, time in the market. Don't look at other people that talk about stocks like, oh, it's just a rich person's game. That's bullcrap. You can put $100. You can cook at home like everyone else is doing, like we're doing with our family. There's a bean and rice leftovers at the house. So you can forego going to get coffee or Chipotle, which didn't really hit their earnings report today either, but they're so low and have been beaten down that it actually bounced off that. You can put some money to work, paper trade, learn to trade, get in the game. I'm not saying now is the right time with the market at the top, but just pick and choose and stay in the market. So 2.3 inflation, 2.3%. If there some troublesome inflation would be a tight labor market to them. So like that wage price spiral we talked about. We don't have a tight labor market. We have a pretty soft, cooling, yet stable in their eyes labor market. And of course, tariff goods would also be troubling inflation, which they said, hey, it's light, it's a one-time thing, and it's going to cruise on through. So Meta, Google, all these companies are like spending hundreds of billions of dollars on data centers and infrastructure. I looked at an AI today. I literally, I'm telling you, this AI voice thing is crazy. I've been saying this for about a year. We're all going to have our own AI voice, us talking to whoever. Not that anybody wants to talk to me, but maybe they do. I don't know. But if you're a loan officer, a realtor, they want to talk to you, you're going to help them foster the American dream. Imagine calling all of your contacts and everyone you've ever talked to with a virtual version of you, having a conversation in real time, live transferring to the live you that's coming. I just had a conversation with Snoop Dogg today. I had a conversation with Mike Tyson. It's unbelievable where AI is today, and it's only going to get better. And so it's crazy. I hope you stuck with me this long in this video because I had 34 hours of view time on my last video. We'll see if we can break that record. We're not just building up server rooms. We are talking about the build out of new supercomputing capacity with the equivalent of 10 nuclear reactors in power draw. We are woefully behind. Case-Shiller home price index for August, still down year over year, but, August wasn't the month. Remember, it takes a little bit of time for home prices to kind of be stably low for a long period of time and people get their stuff together and then move and buy a house. Refinances are instant. Our good friends, Barry Habib and Dan, who ran into Barry last week in Nashville, love you, buddy. They talked about this today. So, it's also not purchase season. I see people talking about the purchase date. Oh, rates are down, but purchases aren't up. No one really buys right now, yet they're buying more. The application index for purchases is actually up, even without a seasonal adjustment. FHFA home price index, just conforming loan amounts, pretty good. It was up, down 2.3%, only up 2.3% year over year. I may either be a psycho, lucky, or super organized, but I used an entire chapstick all the way to the end. It's dead. I don't know if anyone's ever done that. CFPB, 2 rulings got thrown out the door by the CFPB with this current administration. Non-banks were going to have to report enforcement actions to the government, and there was going to be a register and a CFPB system information about their use of certain terms and conditions in form contracts. Both those got thrown out. Click, click. This email's done. Never want to talk about that ever again. And by the way, Fannie Mae crushing it with just under $4 billion in profit. Shout out to Fannie. Great group. Have a wonderful Halloween. If I don't get one out to you, I'll be on the Last Word Friday. Chris, brought to you by the Chrisman Commentary. Cheers.
You've been listening to KP Talks Dollars and Cents, a top-rated show for those who want to learn about the economy and mortgage environment. Tune in each week for more episodes, and please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Kevin Perenio does not render or offer to render personalized investment or tax advice through KP Talks Dollars and Cents. The information provided is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, tax, investment, or legal advice. For more info, follow KP Talks Dollars and Cents on all of our social channels.